That 00 on my screen means it is time to go. All right. Hey everybody, welcome to the shop. It's a Monday. It's a crisp and clear and breezy day outside. We had some storms come through last night and yeah, it was windy. Still breezy today and a little chilly. Excuse me. I had to put on the propane heater this morning to get things fired up a little bit in the shop. Just raise it up a few degrees, make it comfortable. And yeah, so hope everybody had a good weekend. I had a pretty good weekend, did a few things in the shop, got some bike riding in. I don't know if I'm gonna be riding my bike today, unless the wind dies down some. I don't like riding on windy days. It's just, my son says, what's resistance training? And I was like, I've got enough resistance without having the wind going. There's enough resistance from my own body without needing the wind to help it out. So anyway, we'll see about that. I'm not sure. You know what I do need though is I need a light back here. I did not turn this on and I don't think I'll be using it today, but let's turn on the computer back here as well. Always like to have that fired up just in case I want to do something, figure something out. It's a closer computer. I don't have to mess with my streaming one, so you get to check out the backside for just a second there. Anything else going on this weekend? Nothing of note. I did come in and assess where we are at with the current project that I'm working on, which is the batch of sewing machine bases, and we're in a pretty good spot now. I think, was it last Friday? It was Friday. Episode 10. Titled Bottoms Up for a good reason. We put all the bottoms into these bases over here, and you can see here's one right here. These have all they're glued in. They're sturdy, and like I said, I wouldn't, if it was going to be a weight-bearing base, like if I was going to stack this full of stuff and then carry it around, I would not use this method of construction because it's not made to bear a lot of weight. It's basically a rabbet cut into the sides, and then the bottom is cut to fit and then glued in. I just glue along the rabbet, and I clamp these in. I have one still in the clamps that I'm going to take out and show you what I would do after I get it out of the clamps. So from that point, we will have all of the bottoms in. So we've done the handles, we've done the basic box construction. We've put the bottoms into the boxes now. So the next step that I can go to is putting in the barriers for those that are going to have, I'll grab this box again. For those that are going to have, so hang on a second, let me just, a little askew here. Let me just move this over here. I just have this laptop open here so that if I see any comments come in, I can address them as they appear. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, so the base itself is divided into two parts, at least this base is. You'll see there's notches right here, and these notches are a dado that will accept a piece of wood going across there, and that creates a side compartment here, and then the main compartment for where the sewing machine will sit eventually. So this part right here, I save this piece, the compartment side, until after I get these bottoms glued in. Because this piece does not go all the way, even though it's cut to the same dimension as the sides, it does not go all the way to the same depth. So you can see there are these notches right here. But if I put these in first, then I would have to create a bottom for this one and a bottom for this one. And I don't like that method. It's a lot of work to create these. So I basically opt for making one large rabbet cut around the perimeter. I glue my bottom in, and then I basically put these all the way down fit them all the way down against the bottom. They don't have to be like watertight or anything. They're not sealing anything. They just separate the two spaces. But I put them down, I cut them to length. So you'll see, let me see if this is a little better here. So you can see that this stands a little proud by about quarter of an inch. So about a quarter of an inch proud of the sides here. So typically what I will do is shave this down on the table saw. I'll take a measurement of my inside right here, And usually what I'll do is I'll just take this tool right here and I'll just measure what my depth is. This is a great little tool. If you don't have something like this, I really advise getting one. This was made by Craig. It's not really expensive. But anyway, I can figure out what my depth is, which is about 2 3/4 inches. Then I can go to my table saw and set a width on the table saw to knock off the amount that I need to. Now, I do not cut, switch back. I don't cut right down to my exact line because that distance may be a little less or more depending on which side. And the easiest way for me to do this is because I want it to be flush on both sides. The easiest way for me to do that is to leave it a little bit tall and then come back with a hand plane and I plane off the remaining wood that's sticking up so that it is exactly flush with the tops here. And I found that to be the easiest way to do it. Yeah, so I think that's where we would go next. And then following that, if we have time, we're going to do some resawing. And the resaw process is basically to create the lid tops that will go and cover those storage compartments. Once those are set and glued in, and shaved down, flush and everything, we will go through the rabbiting process once again, pardon me. We'll go through the rabbiting process once again inside the top of the storage compartment to create a recess for a lid to set down inside there and be flush with the rest of the top. And it'll kind of come together and hopefully it'll make sense. If you don't know what resawing is, I've got a little example here I can show you. So you take a piece of wood that is a block of wood that you want to have a thinner piece of wood, and you run that through the bandsaw, and then you cut that lengthwise. You run it through the bandsaw like this. Instead of flat ways, you're running it through tall. You cut it in 2 pieces, and then this is the rough cut right here, and I was just making some adjustments. But what I do is I take those 2 pieces and put them together like this and glue them, and those glued together pieces create something called a book match. You basically think of it as a book. Open up, and it's book match. And you can get some really great, interesting grain patterns because the grain should mirror itself on both sides. And when you get that, then what I do is I'll cut it equally on each side to fit in the base, and it gives it just a nice aesthetic, pretty look. I do have some boards here that are wide enough that I could actually just cut a board. I did look in my lumber pile. I have some that I could cut. But the thing is, these lids are only going to be 1/4 inch thick at most. I don't do them usually more than 1/4 inch thick. And if I cut it out of a big piece like this, so this is 3/4 inch, I would have to shave that down a ton to get it thin enough. So the resawing gets it down to the thickness that I need, but it also allows me to glue them and get a more pleasing aesthetic by creating that book match, which just adds a nice little touch to things. And yeah, we'll give that a try a little bit later. I think we will have time to do that today because a lot of this will move pretty quickly. And I don't think that'll be an issue. And all right, let's see. I'm going to end a lot here. Let me get this fired up first. Not that I need it, but it's sitting there, so we might as well make it look pretty, right? And for those who were watching the beginning, you might think I'm a little shorter now, but I actually brought a stool into my shop. Since I spend part of the time talking to you all, just sitting here in front of the camera, it's a little more comfy than actually standing. And because I'm very tall, I admit that, I'm 6'5". So when I stand in front of my workbench, if I want to show you something on the bench and have you see my not get chopped off at the head, it's just a little bit tighter, shorter, more compact image here for you all to see me. All right, what's first on the hit parade today? I'm going to put this away and move this over here. And let's go ahead and let me move my phone over here. I don't need my phone at the moment. Let's go ahead and unclamp the last of the bases. And this, by the way, this wood has been sitting out longer. So if you look at the color difference, you notice that this wood is darker than this wood, and it's only because this wood has been sitting out in my shop a little longer and it has not had any cuts made to it or any of the top of the grain surface worn away. And this is what happens to cherry over time, is it starts to oxidize and get a little darker, which is one of those cool things I love about cherry. This particular piece, oh look, I can tell you how much this costs. So this particular piece was 4.08 board feet. I think it was like 7 inches wide by 84 inches long. And this cost me $22.44. Now, it's been cut and used, so it was much longer than this when I started. But that is the actual width of that particular piece. And that's kind of standard for what I would buy when I'm out looking for sourcing wood. All right, what do we got here? This, for those of you who were here on Friday, this should look hopefully a little familiar. Let me switch off on cameras here a little bit. And let me readjust this guy just a little bit there. All right, there we go. This is the last of the bases that went into the clamps. I didn't subject you all to watching me clamp every single one. Plus, I don't have enough clamps necessarily to do all of them at one time, so I do them in smaller batches of 2 or 3. But these are just really small Bessie clamps, little F clamps that I love. These things are like 6-inch clamps, and I get a lot of use. The thing I really like about these is that unlike some clamps that have a section up here, a clamping portion up here, but it sets down further, this has a flat edge all the way across. And I like that flat edge because it allows me to utilize this whole surface for clamping. So yeah, so I really do like these Bessie clamps a lot. And these aren't terribly expensive. I mean, Bessie clamps are not the cheapest clamps in the world necessarily, especially if you get the big ones like the parallel clamps, which I use to make the joinery in the bases. But these are not too expensive and pretty good value for the dollar there. These pieces of wood up on top are just clamping cauls to allow me to spread the force of the clamp across a larger area and keep that pressed down flat. So this is basically scrap wood. That was just a little squeeze out came out of there. Pretty good here. So these are, there we go. There's all the clamping cauls. And this base, as you can see, is in here really well. The one thing that I do, so a couple of philosophies on this. Squeeze out does happen. I put a very small amount of glue on these bases. I don't use a ton of glue when I'm doing this because it doesn't take a ton of glue. That's the first thing. People have a tendency, I've noticed, to over glue sometimes. And I've tried to really cut back on the amount of glue I use in my joints so that I get coverage, but I don't get a ton of squeeze out, because squeeze out's just glue you throw away. It's not needed. So if you're getting a bunch of squeeze out, you're using too much glue. You should get very minimal squeeze out. You should get some, just a little bit, but it should be minimal, and that means that you're not over gluing. The only time I really will over glue is if I'm making a cutting board and I'm laminating a bunch of pieces. I really want to make sure that I do not have a glue-starved joint when I'm making a cutting board, because that creates voids where bacteria can gather and blah, blah, blah. This is not a cutting board. But it is super sturdy, and I don't have a ton of squeeze out. Now, that being said, there is, I don't know if you're going to see this or not. I'm going to try to show you. So looking into the corner here, hopefully you can see there is a tiny bit in these corners. There's just a tiny bit of squeeze out in there. So the two camps on this is, one, you should wipe it out when the squeeze out occurs, and then it won't be there when it dries. What I have found is that if you use even a wet rag and you try to wipe out the squeeze out, you're still leaving some trace amounts of glue in there. And when you go back to stain, even though it doesn't look like it, there's a little bit of glue that has now been wiped to a really super thin film on that wood, and it's now created a barrier that keeps the stain from being able to go in. I've seen some people use like a straw and they'll run the straw in the corner and try to get it out. I typically wait for my glue to dry, and then I will go and use a chisel, and just any large blobs in the corners, I will chisel those out. Yeah, because then it's just, I'm just removing that glue, and I'm not removing, so I just kind of work the chisel along the side here and then kind of come in from the other portion and just try to get it like this. And then I'll get these little pieces, there we go, just like that. I'll just get these little pieces out, and I don't have like I said, I don't have a lot, and really what I want to get is the stuff that will be visually not very appealing, I guess is the best way to put it. The stuff that's just going to show up when I stain. So I just try to get these corners cleaned out if there's a lot. And like I said, I try to be very minimal on the amount of glue, so there's very little. Now I'm not trying to chisel any wood, I'm just trying to get the glue that leaves a little bead around the side, and usually I can get most of it out, because like I said, there's not a lot. And I mean, you're going to see a tiny bit. That's okay. I mean, it's all right. This is the inside of a box that's going to have a sewing machine set on there. So this is not the show side of the box. That being said, you don't want big giant globs of glue inside there to look fairly decent, right? I mean, if this was a jewelry box, which, you know, boxes are boxes. If this was like a jewelry box, well, I would probably take a little more care and making sure I get every bit of glue out of there, because then it's more of a showpiece, right? But just what I'm doing right now, because there's, like I said, a very minimal amount of glue in there, I'm able to get all this out of here and with very little work. And I did this on all the other bases too, but just go in here and get these little pieces of stuff. And you got to be very careful that you're not digging pieces of wood out of here. So I'm just running this, kind of wedging this underneath those little bits of squeeze out, and they're all hardened now. But there we go. Now that's much cleaner. I can still see kind of tiny trace amounts inside there, but that's okay. There's little trace amounts. I can live with that. That works for me. So that's the end of the glue up process for the bottoms. We have more gluing to do on this base. A couple more things to do in terms of gluing. We have to glue the sides in, right? Because we're going to make sides, or not sides, but the barrier, the divide that goes between the storage compartment and the actual box for the sewing machine base. And we also, those I stick in there, they're gonna be a pretty tight fit, pretty good. I will put some glue in there and squeeze them just to make sure that this is not bowed out any and it's flush against there. The other thing that I need to do is glue in corner pieces that the machine will sit on. I haven't cut those yet, so that process will come later. There is a little bit of glue here in the corner that I want to get out. The other thing is when you turn these, sometimes you can't see it in some light, and then you turn it in another direction and you're like, oh, there's a big piece I missed right there. So let me come down here and just work this. And like I said, I'm just doing this with a chisel, and it's a pretty sharp chisel, but I just, like I said, I get under the glue and free it. And yeah, so that's all there is to that. Not much. All right, next part. We need to get these bases cut and glued and inserted in here. This is number one. I put numbers on here because I cut these hopefully to fit. Now, that being said, the wood moves. I mean, I've been working on this wood now for a while since I've cut these, and over time the wood will move a little bit. It's just because that's just the nature of it. So I find the side that fits in here a little better, and I might have to shave this down just a hair now, or flip it, or to get it to fit. Yeah, see, this one's a little tight, and part of the reason it's tight is, you know, this thing was clamped this way, and so this might be just a hair long to go in there now. I mean, it's ever so long, but it is tight in there. There we go. So, I mean, yeah, I'm just trying to, I don't know that I want to shave this down any. I might go over to the compound miter saw and take like a 64th off of here. And there's a really easy way to do that on the saw. And I might do that. A little more than a 64th. It's like maybe a 32nd off. But it's really simple to do. And because this one has gotten really super tight, and I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, yeah, I need to just shave off of here. I could get my plane out and try to do it, but it'd be hard to keep it perpendicular to this side. I want it nice and square, 90-degree cut. And the best place to do that is on my compound miter saw. The other thing that I need to do is get my little Craig measure tool right here. So this is my Craig measure tool. It has a little brass knob. It has a sliding rule right here. So I can measure the depth, and then I just lock this in, and then that allows me to transfer that measurement over to my saw or whatever I'm doing. And I just need to look and see how deep this is. So I put the ruler down against my base surface, and I'll drop this down, just let it set, tighten the brass screw, and then look at what it gives me for a depth. So this is slightly over 2 3/4. It's about a 32nd over. But more importantly, let's do it this side and see what I get over here. So do the same thing, run this over to this corner, let it all the way down, tighten it up. Let's see what we get for depth on this one. And this one is slightly high. This side is slightly higher than this side. And that's why I said I don't measure to cut things flush on the table saw. I will wait to do that with a handsaw. And the handsaw takes care of any variance in depth on each side. I mean, it's really, really minor, but it is there. Okay, let me do this. Let me see who needs some width adjustment. So there's number one. I'm gonna have to take that to the saw over there. Let's try this one. This is number 3. Let's find number 3 and see how easily this is gonna fit in terms of, and all of these are a little, I mean, this one's a little bit better. I don't want to get it jammed in there right now. This one's still just a hair tight as well. Yeah, you don't want to get them in there. Just a hair tight. I might have to take these widths down. And this happens after I've been, like I said, after I've glued things up and the wood has had a chance to move a little bit and such. This has, pardon me, I did a crappy job on this one. I left a couple of larger glue points in here. And like I said, sometimes like if you don't twirl these around and look at them from different angles, you'll miss some glue squeeze out. So there we go. All right. Sorry. It's one of those things. It's just like once I see it, I can't unsee it, and I can't just let it sit there. It's just one of those things. There we go. All right. Be gone, glue. Be gone. Out, out. All right, number 4. Number 4. This one. Now this one is much better, and you can see that this one actually has no problem sliding in, and when I glue this, I will clamp it to the sides. It's going to be a good fit. Now, the other thing I could do is I could just, instead of having to use this tool, because this one does slide all the way down, you can see it's all the way down against the bottom. I could just take my pencil and measure and see, you know, okay, mark a line that is going to be higher But like I said, the other thing is that it may not be even on both sides. Get this out of here. All right. So that line may not be quite even, in which case what I will want to do is, once again, I'll measure this. So this one does not need to be shaved down. And then the final contestant here, okay. This would be the only one left, should be number 2. And I matched, like I said, I matched these up. So this, yeah, this one is just a hair tight going in. Yeah, I mean, the width of the little dado cuts are perfect. And that's why I say, when I say they're matched, I use the width of this to create that line that I use for cutting the dado, where this is going to go, so that it's going to be having very minimal spacing in there once it's set in. But that being said, I probably could use to shave just a hair off of this one as well. So I have 2 cutting operations I need to do. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and set up. I didn't really set cameras for this. I'm going to go ahead and set up for the saw over here, and we'll make some just really minor cuts off the edges of these things. Just barely shave a little off of there, just to get some nice smooth fits in here. Once we get that done, we'll move over to the table saw, and then we will cut the lengthwise measurement off of these, and that should help tremendously. Yeah. All right, let me go and do 2 things. So one, I'm going to set up a camera angle for you so that you can see. I had one set up for my bandsaw, but since I'm going to be working over here, we'll go ahead and I will put you over here at the saw. And then I have to get my, I have to move my power around. I have to hook up the dust collection. Like I said, I wasn't necessarily planning on doing this, but you know, best laid plans of woodworkers. We usually have to modify them quite a bit. All right, let me put the dust collection in there, which is kind of a joke because the dust collection on this particular saw, which is pretty much, I'll tell you, it's pretty much most saws have really, compound miter saws, let me phrase that. Most compound miter saws, really bad dust collection. I think, let me see if it was that one. Woo, there you go, Old Salty. Somebody was doing a comparison of the dust collection, and I believe the best dust collection for a compound miter saw is a Festool. And I'm not sure how much a Festool compound miter saw runs, but because it has the F on it for Festool, I can guarantee you it is not the cheapest tool in the shop. All right, I'm gonna put my ears on, and what I'm gonna do, just so you can hopefully see this, I lower the blade all the way down. I'll take the piece of wood and I'll push it against the flat of the saw, just like this. So because it's running against the flat of the saw, the teeth of the saw actually stick out. They stick out, they're wider than the flat of the saw. So that saw blade has teeth on the end of it, obviously. So there's teeth right here on this part. Those teeth are, if you measure them, I'd say they're probably a 32nd or maybe less wide, or wider than the actual body of the saw blade. If you push your piece of wood into the blade, you don't want to shove it over, but you just want to push it so that it rests against there. Hold that. The saw will flex as it comes back past the wood, but now you can see when I go to touch it, it's just barely touching the edge of that piece of wood. But that allows me the ability to shave off, I'll bring it back down and shave off just a hair. So let me grab my dust collection, my vacuum, and I'm going to reset this and then bring it up and cut it off, and then we'll take a test fit and see how it looks. said, this is, I mean, I am just shaving a very minute part out of this. And actually, let's go over here. Just a very minute part, but look at that. It just gives me enough that you know, what I don't want is to have this being forced and being bowed out as I'm shoving that wood in there. So I just need it to be just enough to do that. And there you go. That's a good one. This one right here, was this one the good fitter? This one fits fine. We don't need to do this one. This one did need some. Let's check it and see. Yeah. All right, let's knock this one down. Here. All right, we'll come back over here and we'll give this a test fit. There we go. See, like I said, it's okay if there's a little resistance in there. That just means it's snug. And snug's okay. What I don't want is to have to really force. When I put the glue in here, I'll just use my mallet and just kind of tap it evenly down. But yeah, you don't want to have to force it into the dado. So last one here. See how this one is? Yeah, and this one, same way, just a tiny bit. So let's give this a run through on the saw. Dust collection first. A little bit more on this. Okay, I went back and made a second pass. I'm doing as light as I possibly can on these. And I mean, I'm just trying to sneak up on it, the old term that we use there. There we go, look at that. See, now it starts to slide in. And you want to sneak up on it. You don't want to go past it because then you've kind of ruined everything. If you go too far, then you're gonna have your bow flex, your base flexing in when you try to do that. So I just try to really sneak up on that, but that's a really great way of doing that. You can really get it dialed in quickly just by you just ever so slightly shave a little bit off of there. All right, we've got our fits now for the width of the board, right? So now we need to cut a little of the depth of the board off. And that's going to happen over at the table saw. Let me get the table saw ready because I have stuff stacked on it right now. Probably not the best method is stacking things on the table saw, but you know, shop space is a little limited. Actually, what I can do here is I can move my fence. I don't need that much fence. In fact, the fence is going to come over and be a lot less. So give me a second off camera here. Sorry about that. I'm just making space for all these bases over on the other side here. There we go. All right. So making a little space for the bases. This base needs to go off. This base is going to get a different treatment. It's my little rogue. I think I addressed this the other day when I said that I screwed one of these up. It happens. And by screw up, I mean the measurements on it. I screwed it up, and I was a little sad about that. But I think I've come up with a way to save it where it's still a very usable base. And that sometimes is what you deal with in the shop is you know, not just making things, but sometimes coming up with creative ways to, I don't know, fix mistakes or things that happen. Sometimes it's not your own, you know, it's not a mistake that you made. Sometimes things will happen and wood will chip out or things, you know, go wrong. And then instead of scrapping the whole thing, sometimes you just look at it and say, well, what can I do to maybe make a modification that will make this better? All right, that looks pretty good in terms of depth. I wanted to set my saw depth there. Now what I need to do is I need to find the depth on here that I'm going to cut these. So like I showed you before, I'm just going to set this right over the top here, let that fall down, measure it. And this one is right at 2 3/4. I'm going to do the same to this one. And see how this side looks. This one's just a hair larger than 2 3/4, which means I want to take this a little taller, maybe a 1/16 taller than 2 3/4. That will give me enough to shave off using my hand plane. Sorry, words, things. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this and loosen this screw. And I'm going to set this depth just a little deeper. So about a 1/16 over. I don't want to do too much because then it creates a lot of hand planing. And, you know, my point isn't to, you know, do a lot of hand planing. It's to just get these cut down. So let me go ahead and mark this now. And I will just use this to set up the width on the saw blade by moving my fence over. I still have to plug the saw blade in, so don't worry, it's not plugged in. So I'm touching my blade here, it's not plugged in. Don't freak out on me, people. People get very freaked out when you do things. They're like, oh my God, I can't believe you touched that blade, it's so unsafe. It's like, all right, I didn't, you know, it's unsafe if it's plugged in and ready to roll. It's not, so don't freak out on me, people. All right, because right now my plug is plugged into my crosscut saw. They are not ever plugged in at the same time because, well, I just don't have that option in my shop. All right, this fits perfectly over that width, which allows me to drop this piece down. And this piece will run on the flat of the table and keeps it from tipping. I know some people just use regular push blocks. They will use push sticks and things like that. And I have some of those where it just rides on top and pushes. The problem with that, at least in my opinion, is that you have more of a chance of it not staying flush against the fence. You really want it to be tight against the fence. I could run a feather board right here, which would help matters a lot. But this does a great job. It has grippy rubber pads on the bottom. Sometimes I just give them a little lick. Don't, you know, not directly on them because that's gross. But I will just kind of moisten them and that gets the grippiness up there. I take it and push it all the way against the wall, and now it will give me a push all the way through. Now, there we go. And then this piece right here keeps it from tipping over to the side and causing a dangerous situation, which is why I love these. I'm no sponsor, no nothing, but this is a micro jig product, and I have several of these, and they are just always useful in my shop. All right, that is set up. I still have to run my dust collection and my power back to my saw. So let me run over and grab the dust collection. And well, I'll just grab the power while I'm over here. And why did it get stuck in there? There we go. All right, I'm gonna throw the power cord over here for a second. Let's run the dust collection up into the back of the table saw because that's just how we roll. Grab my remote and yeah, all right. Let's see, I've got my remote. I've got my power. I'm gonna plug that in right here. And now we are good to cut this particular base divider down for this particular machine. Like I said, and this operation is different for every single one of these. I don't just use one setup. It just takes a minute to measure, but it's going to be much more accurate and give me a lot less hand planing to do at the other end, because there is some variance in these from base to base. All right, time to cut. All right, and I don't know if you can see it from that camera angle, but I am just basically about a 1/16 of an inch above the edge here, which is exactly where I want to be, because when I glue and set this down, this will sit against the bottom. It'll be just a little proud, and then I'll knock those down. All right, moving on. I'll lay that. I don't know what I'm going to do with these. Let me set this over here. That way I know this one's done. All right, moving on. Let's measure this next one. And same setup, same process. We're just going to do this over and over again. I'm sorry to make you watch the same thing. Now, this was a little taller than that last one. Okay, this was 3/4 plus about a 32nd. See if this has the same width here, or same depth. Yeah, so these are about 32nd taller than this one, or more depth. And so let me just move this up a little bit, and then we can mark this one. Now I've got to find the side I want to be the upside. We'll make this the upside. We'll cut this. Well, I don't know that yet, but I'm going to cut it off right here and measure this. Let's set this down against here without knocking everything off my fence. And then let's readjust this cut here. There we go. Right there. All right. I mean, in essence, what I'm doing is I'm saving myself from, I don't even know if you can see this or not, but this cutoff right here, I'm saving myself from having to hand plane this much wood off of these, so I can make much smaller cuts on these, slightly above, and that will be much faster and easier for me to do with the hand plane once they're set in. And we will just rinse and repeat. All right. Yeah, I'm not sure what Craig calls this tool. If you go to the Craig site, and I think if you look under like their measurement tools or whatever, you'll find this thing. It's super useful. I found it, I was at the woodworking show. I wasn't looking for this tool. I just kind of happened upon it at the woodworking show. And yeah, I just find so many uses for it. It actually has a bubble level in the middle of it right here. So if you wanted to use it as a level, you can. Yeah, these need to go this much deeper. But I fell in love with this thing. Just all the functionality it gives me is really great. And it's so useful all the time. I don't know how many times I use this on pretty much almost every project I do. I use this thing. Now this is going to have to go back a hair. There we go. But yeah, I use it all the time, and I'm going to use it again when it comes time for doing the feet that the machine will rest on. When I do those corner rests, or whatever you want to call them, I will use this again to figure out how deep to make those. Hopefully you saw that when I was cutting that little piece, that the little offcut, and it just flies out. It's a good reason not to stand directly behind your saw blade if you're right here. That's a little piece and it's not going to impart too much damage, but you could, you know, kick that thing into you. So I always try to stand a little off to the side. I'm more comfortable standing to the left of my blade. Some people stand to the right of their blades. I've always been more comfortable to the left, and that's what works for me. But you do you, I do me. We'll all be happy in the end, right? Hopefully. Hopefully everybody's happy. All right, let me get this set up. But yeah, I'm more comfortable standing to the left of my blade. Ooh, that one's much longer or deeper. Let's see what you got on this side. Now, just to make sure, and you know, the other thing is, it's like, okay, if there's a little glob of glue that I didn't clear out and it resting on that glue, it'll make me think it's deeper than it really is, or less shallow. So that's why it's also important to get that out. Wow, this thing is really much. So I'm going to go right there. So this, I'm only cutting this to like 2 7/8 on here. So there's not as much off of this one coming this way. Let's get this cut down. Measure this. I want you're my measuring tooth right there. We go. All right. Yeah, when I'm trying to dial in, I have a number scale, which is fairly accurate and gets me in ballpark. And then I will just eyeball. And usually when I get really close, I mean, I just loosen the fence handle and I'm just giving it a tiny tap. And then the other thing is I lock it down, because when I lock down, it does shift it just slightly. So I always make sure that once I get that measurement, I lock this down and make sure that measurement didn't skew a little bit. I've had that happen. So I'm always pretty careful about double checking that measurement. Like I said, this isn't the most, did I just budge that? No, this is not the most precise of cuts I'll ever make. It doesn't need to be, but it's just a good habit to be into for me. Alrighty, that is that. That's all the sides. That's pretty good. We can now move into some more gluing. Yay. You know, oh, that's not the one you want. There we go. Glue is glue. I mean, you just, it's a wood project. It's going to be glued. That's all there is to it. You know, the only problem I have with gluing, I don't mind glue. It's just that glue takes forever sometimes, you know. It's like doing glue ups just sometimes takes a while. And you just have to plan for the glue to be part of the process. Now, the good thing is, like, because this is captured in a dado, it's not going to skew and move and everything else. That glue is just basically there to make sure that this thing doesn't shift over time. That's it. It's not needing to hold the wood in place or anything. It just, I mean, it does, but it just keeps it from shifting over. Like if I'm doing any cuts, it won't rise up or anything. It'll just be seated in place. So how are we going to do this? Well, I'm going to glue inside of a dado, but really what I need to do is make sure that I have glue in on the surfaces. I mean, do I need glue in the end there? I don't know. That's it. It's a weird, my words aren't working today. So I've got end grain here that I'm going to be gluing with. When I glue, if I glue on this side, well, then I've got end grain here and end grain here. So really I'm gluing end grain to face grain all over this thing. So really it doesn't matter. If the fit is really nice, I'll just glue on the sides here and just kind of rub it around with my finger. Like I said, I'm trying to keep my glue use down to a minimum. to just use the amount of glue that I need and not have to worry about the squeeze out, because squeeze out just means that's more work that I have to deal with. Pardon me. Oh, I got to get my little needle here and clean my glue head out a little bit. Just, it gives me cleaner application of the glue if I get all the old dried glue out of here. So just one of those things. There we go. And it usually doesn't take too long. And put my little needle back. I love my little needle. All right, so I think in this case what I'm going to do is put a little glue along the inside here, and then the same thing up on this side. I'll flip it over obviously, but just apply some into this work surface here, and then I'm going to just use my finger and smooth that out. And then, you know, if I have any extra, I can run it on those sides. After smoothing, I can just kind of run a bead, you know, not a bead, but just the excess. I'll just kind of paint it on the side there with my finger. It's not rocket science. It's glue. But like I said, just a small amount of glue. Spread that around in here best I can. Put a little on this side. Put a little on this side, but the majority of the glue is actually on this bottom part of the dado right here. So, all right. Once I get that done, let me just make sure. There we go. Now I get to play tappy tap. I should have gotten a paper towel. Hang on one second, please. While I grab a paper towel, mainly for cleaning my finger off and not getting glue all over the base. That kind of defeats the purpose of using a little bit of glue if I go ahead and smear it all over the place. Know what I mean? I'm sure you do. All right. We're going to take our now newly cut down piece of wood, which has now been cut to length this way and cut to width this way. We will insert it into here. It's a nice fit. And then I will get my trusty little mallet here and just start there we go. Just, like I said, just enough pressure to, it doesn't take a lot of, if you get it cut right, it doesn't take a lot of tapping. Gives you a nice fit. You can see, hopefully, that it's just a little proud on each side. Just a little proud, just a little taller than the sides. That gives me an opportunity to run that plane across and then get it right down to the side here. Also, glue-wise, I think I did pretty good. I don't see any, there's one little teeny, tiny drop of glue. I'm just gonna, I know, I said I wouldn't do this, but I'm gonna just, because it's so small, and it's in that corner. There we go. But that is the only glue that I see on here, and that's good. The other thing I need to do is put a clamp on here just to ensure that I'm getting enough clamping pressure. So I'm just going to grab a 12-inch clamp. This is also a Bessie clamp, an F style. Now you notice this one actually has what I was talking about before. See how this one has a foot on it? And that foot does not sit flat with the rest of this clamp. Now if I take this off, it does probably, but that's why I like those little ones, because it affords me that nice flat clamping surface. All I'm going to do with this, honestly, is set it right down on the side here, and here's the kicker. I don't need it to be completely flush at the bottom. So right down where that piece of wood goes all the way, travels all the way down here, I don't care if it's exactly pushing against that side there. I care that it's pushing against the sides up here, because that's where you see that joint. And as long as I get a good seal right there, I'm good. So I'm going to rest this on here, just give it a little, helps me keep it aligned. And then I'm just going to apply some pressure here. And there we go. That's all the clamping I need to do for these. So let me grab the next one, and we'll just glue and clamp and glue and clamp. It's pretty quick. get these things moving. Once you get it going, hang on. It's really important for me to get this glue, any glue, out of the compartments, because once this side goes in here, there is almost no way to get a tool inside here, because then your space is just really limited. So let me make sure. I had a little bit of glue in here that I missed. I don't know how I missed so much. I thought I got all these, but you know what? It is what it is. Sorry. I'm just digging little bits of glue out of these corners here because I do not want any glue squeeze out in here. That's better, and that's better. Okay, now we can start gluing. My bad. Sorry about that. Let me just run through here. Just check in chat. If you're watching, you want to say hi or you got a question, I will try to check the chat periodically, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you want to know why I do a particular thing instead of doing it a different way. I am always up for discussion, and I will tell you that even though I do this a lot, I am by no way means a master craftsman in the wood shop. There is the stuff I don't know could fill volumes. So that's what I like about all this, though, is it's kind of, you know, as I go through, I learn things, I watch YouTube videos, I pick up new ideas, I do things on my own and see what works and what doesn't. And so this whole thing for me is a learning process. And then I take all that new knowledge and put it into application. But what that doesn't mean is that I know everything, because I know that I don't know everything. This has a little bit of a, you can see it up here. So there's a little knot in this piece of wood. It's not huge, it's just a tiny little imperfection there. And this one is a little bit more clear. There's a little tiny thing here, but when it comes to actually hand planing this creates problems because the wood grain around this moves in different directions. That being said, I'm going to load this in with this at the bottom and have this as my top surface. And that way, when I start to plane this off, it'll be a little easier on the plane. It won't have to work quite so hard. So that's one of the things I look at when I'm deciding how to put this in, is how easy will this wood plane. That one went in pretty smooth, just a tiny bit above. Right, grab another one of these clamps. Oh, is this 12 inches? Yeah, it's like a 12-inch clamp. And we will put this clamp in here. Unfortunately, this is like the only two of these. I need to get some more of these. I think these came in a set at Home Depot for, I think I got them on sale for like 25 bucks. So it came with two of these and then two 8-inch. And I really like these, and I might go back and get another set or look for them to be on sale again, because this is a really nice size to have, this 12-inch, especially for the work that I do on these bases. Anything clamping lengthwise, I use my parallel clamps for, but widthwise, it's nice to have clamps that easily span that divide and give me nice clamping on the sides here. All right, let's get another one going here. Come on, stop talking, start working. Or at least work while you talk. You know, these people that just won't shut up. And that would be me, by the way. I understand that. I know that's me. That's one of the reasons why I do this, is because, you know, at least if I do this, people don't look at me too weird, because then I pretend I'm not talking to myself, I'm talking to you. So it's not quite as weird as I would probably be doing this anyway. And not having the excuse of a live stream is a little bit more weird, I would think. I do that quite a bit, though, where I will out loud talk myself through a problem or something, because sometimes just hearing it out loud makes it make more sense or helps me figure things out. All right. Make sure there's nothing there. That looks good. Last one, number 1. And okay, let me show you really quickly. So if you look at the wood grain on here, you'll notice that the grain pattern is, we'll call it going downhill over here, right? So this grain pattern is going downhill. When I go to plane this off, planing this way with the grain, that's what we call it, with the grain, it gives me a really nice smooth surface. So that's one of the other things I look for is grain direction and how easy that will be in terms of planing off this little bit of edge that I need to plane off. And that is a really nice grain direction that will allow this to be much easier to clean off. Now this one, as I recall, was the tightest of them. I did not trim this one down, but that's all right. We'll just sorry about that. I should have taken that to the saw and taken a little bit more off of there. It was just a little tight for that space, but that's all right. It's in. It's all the way at the bottom. It is tight against the bottom right here. Like I said, that was a little bit more smacking than I probably needed to do. Let me grab another clamp. I've got some trigger clamps that will work for this right here. Just like I said, usually 12-inch clamps are what I use the most. So what I'm looking at, I don't know if I can capture this or not. Let me see if I can show you in here. Right on the edge, right here is a little void between these two pieces of wood. And I don't know if you can see, there's a little void right there, just a tiny void. And all I'm looking to do is close that void up. I want it to be a nice, clean joint. So by putting a little pressure on it with a clamp, it squeezes in just enough to create that contact point there. And yep, that should do it. It just closes that. I mean, that void is like a 64th of an inch. It is really not that much of a void, but it's enough that when I look down there, I can see it. And that means I would probably have to end up, if I don't close it, then I have to either put a plug down there, a little shim of piece of wood, or use a filler. And I don't like using fillers, especially on the top. That just does not look good. This one should hopefully be a little easier. This one's a little bit smoother, so yeah, this guy will go. I have to do a little more smacking, but it'll go. All right, the other thing, like I said, just looking at my grain direction, the side I want to use, they're both clean. This side, and there's some wood burn from the saw. If I put this in down towards the base, then that's fine. I'm gonna move my chair back a little bit. There we go. If I have this side down against the base, and no one will ever see it, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and glue this up. I think that's where I'm going to go. Sometimes I flip-flop on that. That one's pretty easy. I am going to cut that side off. So probably with the hand plane, that portion of the burned wood would not really even come into play. But depending if that burn is just a hair deeper than I need to shave off, well, now I'm left with a burn on top, and I would have to try to sand it out, and then that would create a little divot, and that wouldn't be flat. So let's just put that down low so no one will see it. It'll be our little secret. How about that? We'll just hide stuff. Another great woodworker tool, hiding your imperfections. Happens all the time, especially furniture makers will hide a lot of things on interiors and undersides and such, because they're always looking for that nicer, better, more aesthetically pleasing stuff that requires less work on their end. So they'll hide stuff on the interiors of drawers and stuff like that. All right, burn side down. And then which way do I want to fit this? Now this. The only problem with this board is this board had some heavy snipe to it. It was a cutoff and it has a little bit of snipe. So there is a little bit of a lip here, and I don't know how much that's going to affect things, but it's better fitting this way. So I'm going to go this way, get the burn side down. Let's go ahead and tap this in. You can, well, I don't know if you can hear, but as I get to where it bottoms out, the sound of the tapping goes from a higher pitch to a lower pitch, meaning that I've actually hit the bottom, and now that force is being spread throughout the base, not just on here. It's kind of cool. All right, that is seated really well. I'm going to get one more clamp for this one, and then these need to set in the clamps for a little while. Like I said, these don't need to clamp, like I don't need to clamp these overnight because they're already captured in that dado. Let me get a nice squeeze on this. I really have good joints, good fit on the sides. The only place I'm a little thin on this one is right here. It's a little thin, which bugs me. But what I do know is that as I finish this part up, I'm going to be cutting a rabbet in on this edge, about 1/4 of an inch, running all the way around here, because that's where the lid is going to set down into there. So if I have any imperfection in these areas right here, a lot of that might be obscured by the fact that I'm doing a rabbet bit around the interior. So 1/4 of an inch of this wood is going to come off. That's like right here. You probably can't see it, but there's a chip, slight chip out of this edge right here. And I don't really care because that's going to get knocked out when I do the rabbet. Same thing happens on if I get anything on the very corners or the edges. I do roundovers on all of these pieces. The corners get rounded substantially. There's like a 1-inch roundover that comes. It's coming in a couple of days, right? So there's a 1-inch roundover that's going to come on here. And so anything that's wrong with these corners, even though I spent a lot of time getting these flush, it's still going to be rounded over. So a lot of this wood is going to disappear. So, you know, like I said, I try to make these perfect from the start, but the fact is that I do have some procedures coming up that will remedy any imperfections in these edges and the corners. And so that's a nice way of kind of not having to worry too much about them. All right. Blah, 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 blah. Words, stuff, words. Where are we at? We can't do anything. I mean, technically I could probably plane those down, but I've got those clamps are sort of in the way, and I'd rather just be able to push through them with my hand plane and not have to worry about not hitting the clamp. So we'll probably I will let those sit for a couple of hours. In fact, I will probably let them sit till next week, maybe, or not next week, till Wednesday when we come back. If you come back. Wednesday, episode 12, we will do the rabbets for those. We will shave those down. We will do the rabbets, and we can start fitting our lids to go in there. So let's look where we're at right now. Let's take a time out. Let's look at where we're at right this minute on these bases. All right. We have the major box joinery done. So all of the joinery is done here. Go down just a little bit more. There we go. And that means that the sides are now all the sides are in, the bottoms are in. I have the middle, whatever you want to call it, divider to separate between the main base and the side compartment. So all of that is done. What's left to do? Well, once this dries, the next step will be to shave these down so that they are the exact size here. I will also flatten the top. So I did this to the bottoms, and you probably saw me doing it to the bottom before I did the rabbet cuts to make sure that that rabbet was going to travel equally around all sides. I will do the same thing on the top just to make sure, because I need to do a rabbet cut on here. I want to make sure that my tops are about as equal as I can get them. They're not off too much, but there is a little bit on the edges. I just want to get those flat. So I need to flatten them down. I need to cut the rabbet bit inside here. I need to create the lids that are going to go onto here. We need to cut the lids down to size so that they fit perfectly in here. And it's going to be kind of the same process using that nickel to round the corners and set them in here. Then what I will do is plane them down with a hand plane. I will plane those flat as best I can so that the lids are flush. I want those lids to basically be flush so it'll sit and be inset right in there. So that should be a flat work surface right there. I also need to make a little, what I do is I draw a little semicircle in here in the lid, and then I cut that out and kind of sand it so that's smooth. So that gives a place to stick your finger in and pull the lid out. Have to do that. I have to make corner stops, little corner triangles that the machine will set on, because you want the machine to set down inside the base, but it doesn't set all the way on the bottom. It sets on these corner rests, and those need to be cut to the exact size to keep the bed of the sewing machine pretty flush with this. So you have to do some measuring, figure out how deep the deck is on the sewing machine. So what I'm talking about is right here. I happen to have a sewing machine right here. So the deck of this thing is a certain width right here. There's a depth to that. I want this to be flush with the side of the machine. So it sits flush. So on all sides, it's kind of sitting, well, you can't really see that, can you? Hopefully you can see that. So it's going to sit flush with the machine, and it'll rest on little triangular corner pieces on the underside of these corners right here, because it's flat under here. These are flat corners. But I want this surface to be flush with the edges. So I need to measure how thick this is, subtract that from the depth of the base, and then that's how long I need to cut those corners in. Then I need to glue those corners into the base. So that's another step, is gluing those in. Let's see what else. We need to round all of these corners. So I need to do that 1-inch round over on all the corners here. And then I will do my, I'll do a sand, which is, I'll go through 2/3 of my sanding. I'll get up to about 220, or no, I'm sorry. I will get to 150 on the exteriors. Then what I will do is a round over bit, but it's a little tiny 1/8 inch round over to knock all of the sharp edges off of here. I'll just do an 1/8 inch round over on the bottom and the top. And once that 1/8 inch round over is done, I go through with a final sand of like 220. And then, yeah, then it's ready for finish. So you can see, hopefully you can see, I mean, that was a lot of stuff I went through. It looks like it's almost done. There's still a lot to be done. And that's the thing with these bases, and people look at it and go, it's just a base. There's so much work that goes into one of these things. Even though it looks so simple, it's all the little details and all the little steps. And like every time I have to glue something, that's time that I take away from the process in order to be able to get this finished. So, oh, you have to glue something? Well, you can add anywhere from 2 hours to half a day for the glue. So that adds to the amount of time it takes to do these things. And even if I wasn't actively filming these things right now, there's a little bump in that one. That's kind of interesting. Even if I wasn't actively live streaming all of this stuff, the process wouldn't be much different from what I'm doing right now. I would just be talking a little less. But like right now, I'm at a standstill on these things. There's nowhere else to go. So I will move on to another part. And that's the other thing I like to do, is try to figure out, and I do this with a lot of projects, not just these, but I try to figure out if there are things like gluing going on. Well, are there things I can do in the period of time that glue has to set? Is there other pieces of the project that can be worked on that will keep me busy and keep things moving forward? and not lose so much time. On this part of the project, I'm going to say yes, because now we will move on to doing a resaw of this piece of wood, and we are going to make lids for all of the bases. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 bases. Maybe not all the bases. We'll see. I'm going to try to get as much as I can out of this one. So let me show you what goes into figuring that out. Let me grab a ruler, and we will grab one of these bases. Now all of these are going to be approximately the same, so I'm not going to get the exact measurements right now, but these are the approximate widths and lengths that I'm going to need. And tell you what I'm going to do is grab a piece of paper here, and I'm going to use that to just write some stuff down. I highly advise that you write things down if you're writing measurements and such, just to keep them straight in your head. So our lid, like I said, when I make this lid, I'm going to be cutting a 1/4 inch wide rabbet all the way around the interior, and that's what the lid's going to fit into. In order to get that measurement, I need to go across this width right here, and I can do something as simple as, let me mark a 1/4 inch here on my little Craig thing here. Another reason why I like this. So I'm just going to really quickly, for rough measurement, I'm going to mark a 1/4 inch here and a 1/4 inch here. It's ballpark. And then I'm going to measure that distance from this mark to this mark, and that will tell me that I need to cut this 4 and, well, I'm going to go a little over. So 4 3/8, 1, 2, 3, 4 3/8 wide, 4 3/8. And I need to do the same thing down here, because there's a 1/4 inch lip that's going to be cut here, a little rabbet where it's going to set. So we'll measure down here, and then we will measure this. Now I'm not using the end of the tape measure. I'm starting at the number 1 mark right there. It just gets me a little bit more accurate, I think. All right, and then make sure I subtract 1 inch from whatever I'm measuring it. So this says 8 and, make sure it's on there. So 8 and 4 5/8. So 7 5/8. Subtract that inch. So 7 5/8. All right, so I need pieces of wood. They're at least 4 3/8. And so even though I have a lot of scrap like this, well, this wood is not wide enough. Obviously, this is 3 inches wide because that's what I cut my pieces at. So not wide enough to cover that storage compartment. I can take pieces of wood like this and resaw them and book match them. I did not have a lot of pieces of wood like this. For whatever reason, I was kind of down in my lumber supplies looking around, and I did a really good job of using scrap, but I kind of forgot that I'm going to need some scrap for doing the lids. All right, that being said, let's see what I do have. I have this piece of wood right here. It is wider than I need in terms of if I'm going to resaw this. Like I said, remember, resawing, here's the piece of wood. We're going to cut it on the saw, and then we're going to flip it this way. So a 3-inch wide piece of wood becomes 6 inches. This was not wide enough to cover that span by itself. It's just barely, but it's 4 1/4. So about 1/8 inch not wide enough. If this was wide enough, I would just cut them off and make them out of this, probably just one piece, because it's got a nice grain pattern. But it's not wide enough, but it is long. 7 5/8. So I'm going to need 22 1/2 inches plus some kerf in there. This is 24 inches wide, so I should be able to, no, I'm sorry. I'm going to get 3 out of this. I need 4. I'm going to get 3 out of this piece right here. I'll need to find another piece that I can use, and I'll dig through the scrap again. I'll try to find one like this. Unfortunately, this one's got little cuts in it, and I can't get enough width maybe out of this to, what do I need? 7 5, yeah, so I just don't have enough width in this one. That's a shame because this one would have worked out well, but for now it's It's a demo piece of wood. Anyway, I can get 3 out of this one. I'll find another piece of wood that I can get some more out of. I have this piece of wood right here, which is nice. This is the one I was telling earlier about how much the wood costs, because it's written on the board. But this is, I could get maybe a small base out of this one piece. I don't want to sacrifice all of this just for the tops, because like I said, I could probably get a small base out of that, and that would be sad. This is maple. I'm not going to use maple. I'll find another piece. Anyway, I need 4 of these things. But for now, we will go with this piece right here. And I've got 2 options moving forward. It needs to be resawing. Remember, resawing is running this through the blade this way so that they split apart. The options that I have are to run it through as is, which would be fine, and cut the full height, which, what did we say this is, 4 1/4? Yeah, give or take. So cut 4 1/4 inches. Or the other option is to put this through the table saw, make it narrower, so not as wide, and then run that through the saw like this. The advantage of doing that is that the saw is going to work less hard because it's not cutting through as thick a piece of wood. And I think that is probably the way I'm going to do this. Now, I need to leave enough wood so that when I'm going to take these pieces, flip them, and glue them together. And so I need to double up the width to figure out what I need. I need 4 3/8. If I do half of 4 3/8, that's, what is that, 2 3/16, something like that. I'm probably going to go with, if I went with 2 3/4, width-wise, if I did that together, that would be, what would that, for 5 1/4 inches? 5 1/2 inches. Math is not my forte. So if I do 2 3/4, that's 5 1/2 inches in width. I only need 4 3/8. That allows me to have room to shave off on each side. So let's figure 2 3/4 wide. Let's do that. Let's see where we're at here. So 2 3/4 on this. It's right about there. All right, so if I cut off 2 3/4, that means I'm going to lose, how much am I going to lose off of this board? About an inch and 3/8 or so. I'm okay with that. Like I said, the whole point of this is that I'm going to resaw these, so this will basically be doubled in width once I'm done and then glued together. The other thing is I want to have a really nice looking pattern. And so I'm looking at these to figure out where is my best pattern for matching. You can look at the outside, but the other pattern you're going to have to, the pattern you're going to be matching is actually not revealed yet. It's, once you open it up, this side right here would be the pattern that gets matched up. And look, I mean, you'll see some of it here, but it's hard to see that. It's really comes to life when you cut that and then you open those up and put them together. But I think working with a thinner piece makes more sense because I won't have that much to do. So I'm going to use, I like these lines that are coming down this way. I think these will flow into each other nicely and create this nice little pattern. So I'm going to cut it, I'm going to cut this end off the board, I believe, would be the smart play. So let me measure this, and then we can go measure this out on the saw here. Like I said, that's 2.75, and yeah, so 2.5 would be 5 1/2. 5 1/2 inches is more than enough width, and then I'll have to deal with the length. And like I said, 7 5/8. I'll get 3, easily get 3 out of this. 1, 2, 3. I wish it was longer. It's not, but you know what? That's okay. Let me move some stuff around here. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to take just a momentary break. If you want to run, use the restroom, grab a drink, you know, kick back, do whatever. Give me just a minute. I'm going to rearrange some cameras and some stuff on the table and get ready for cutting. So I'll be right back. Alrighty, welcome back. That wasn't a really long break. And what do we got here? So I need to set my depth. It should be, this piece is actually a little thicker too. That's the other thing that I didn't mention was that if I'm taking, here we go, like a stock piece like this, it's 3/4 of an inch wide, and now I have to resaw this. I'm splitting that piece of wood in two, right? So I'm cutting that right down the middle here. Well, that's great. That's still enough thickness. But if you look at 3/4 of an inch wide and you cut 3/4 in half, you're left with a piece that's just maybe 1/8 of an inch or more, and you've got the kerf. So don't forget, anytime you're cutting with a saw, you have to consider the kerf. The kerf is the thickness of the blade, which you have to subtract that amount of wood out of your end measurement because it's going to be turned to sawdust. So I like to use a thicker piece of wood to do my resawing. That's the beauty of this piece of wood, is that it is, I believe, let me just check it. This should be, yeah, this is 7/8. That gives me a lot of meat on each side to work with, and that makes things a lot more comfortable. All right, let me find my line here that I drew somewhere. Where did it go? There it is. All right, let's see what we need to do to make this piece cut exactly where it needs to go. And all right, maybe just right there. Okay, we've got that set. Move this over just a little bit so it doesn't run into it off the table. And check, we're good here. I will need to readjust. Now, feel this. Okay, that's nice and flush and flat. All right, let me run this. Now see, this will not fit down the edge because it's too wide, right? So all I'm going to do is lower or raise this back up so that it sits on the piece of wood. The nice thing is that because there is a foot on this side of the cut and then feet on this side, they will guide that wood through straight and keep the cut going all the way to the end of the piece of wood. So that's kind of handy. All right, power. We've got dust collection in. And yeah, let's go ahead and trim this piece down and see what we get. So you can see how this side keeps that whole piece moving through nice and square together. And any burn that I got was on this piece, which is the scrap. And there's a tiny bit. I mean, I tried to keep that saw moving as fluidly as possible through there, but still a little burn on that piece. This, though, looks really good and nice and smooth. There's no, I can't feel any saw marks or anything in here. So that turned out really nice. This is actually smoother than this side. All right, then what we will do from there is we will resaw. But before we do that, I'm gonna readjust my one camera. You can't see this at the moment, but there's a camera here that I've got set up for the resaw function. And I'm just setting that up so that I don't have to readjust that. All right. And then, actually it's a little dusty too. Let me just wipe that lens off. Come back around here because I'm not just going to be jumping right into the saw. I still have to figure out where I want to saw this and then set the saw blade up. So let's bring this board over here and talk about the resaw process for just a moment. Like I said, we've got this piece of wood right here, which is 7/8, right? So out of 7/8, which I'm going to just measure this again just to make sure. Yep, 7/8 wide. Out of that 7/8, I need to knock that in half. Well, let's see. That would be, was that for 7/16? It's basically half of 7/8. So 7/16 is where I need to make my halfway mark. And if I set this tool, come down here. If I set this tool up to 7/16, which is basically a 1/16 less than half an inch, so I'm going to set that right there. And then one way you can quickly just kind of measure to make sure things are right is just do this, flip it around, do this, and see if your lines match up in the same place. They should. This is just a fraction. I'm just a fraction off, and I can see that now. Just a hair off there. I'm going to redo this. Let me just check this again. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm going to be setting up my, yep, that line is in the exact same place. I'm going to be setting up my marking gauge. And even though I hopefully will have my table saw set up so that it does a really nice straight cut, having a line going all the way along the length of your item really helps to keep that cut on track. It's not going to be perfect. I mean, my saw, I do the best I can with the saw I have. It is not the best saw for resawing. I know that. And so because I know that, I also do my best to ensure that I can get the best cut that I can possibly get. So I need to set my marking gauge up. So I will just, I can set it this way too. So I'm setting this so that it runs right to that edge, and I'll push this against it. I know this is kind of weird, but all I'm trying to do is establish that exact, I'm trying to establish this width right here with my marking gauge depth. And I don't know if you can see that. So the marking gauge, I want this part that's sticking out of the gauge to be exactly lining up on here. So if I take this and put it against there, like this, it's flush. And so this should give me the exact same line. I can check that on the pencil mark that I made over here. I can just run this on that pencil mark and see, and it's exactly on that pencil mark right there. This line is going to be my guide all the way down this board as I resaw. Because like I said, my saw is not, it's not the best resawing saw in the world. But if I have a guide here, I can keep it on track. It is straight up and down enough. I've got it set up enough that I can, as long as I can see this line and keep it on track, hopefully I should get a nice, the goal is to get equal wood on each side of the cut, okay? And that means there's, when I glue it up and there's less, I have to flatten out and shave down. So the goal is to keep that cut cutting right down through the middle and to keep it straight up and down. To do that, I put a guideline on here. So I'm going to use this and just draw across the front. And then I will reinforce this with some pencil going in that line that I'm cutting right now. That will allow me to see this better when I'm over at the saw. And I'm going to carry this all the way to the end. There we go. If you haven't watched my previous episodes where I actually put that thing together, I made that marking gauge. You can buy a marking gauge, the exact same type marking gauge at, you know, I don't think you can get them at Home Depot, maybe, but definitely if you go to like Rockler or Kingsplore or Woodcraft or whatever, you can find them at decent woodworking shops. But you'll pay 35 bucks. I paid 10 bucks for the kit and made my own block out of it, and I have nothing to complain about. It is awesome. All right, there is my line. Now going the length of the board. I will also make one on the end here because that helps me to align it with the saw blade when I'm setting things up. Now this is a little harder because it's end grain, so it's just a little harder to mark the end grain. But just try to keep it square, flush. You got to keep this flush against your side. That's what makes the marking gauge work. And that did a good job. So I can just, like I said, I'm just gonna put a thin pencil lead inside there, and that just helps me visualize that. But the pencil's riding right in that cut line. So that helps me to visualize the area that's gonna be cut here and here. All right, now I think we've got that down. Now it's time to set up the saw. Let me just recess this blade inside there. So now we can go over to the saw. I move my camera angle over so you can see the saw. I'm going to move that vacuum back out of the way so that that attachment is not sticking in your face. And I need to grab my dust collection and put it in the saw. Now, what I did yesterday was I set up my resaw blade in my table saw. I had a thin blade in here. I had like a 1/4 of an inch blade in here. And the 1/4 inch blade is really great if you have to turn, if you're turning a piece of wood and making rounded cuts in that piece of wood, you definitely want a thin blade in there because it helps you to turn the corners better and just keeps you on track for making those cuts. So a thin, like if I had a pattern on here and I needed to cut, like if I needed to cut a circle out of here, if I have a 1/2 inch blade on there, my blade is going to interfere with that front cut. The blade is going to start, the back of the blade, because it's so wide, interferes from that being able to travel that arc. But if I have a thin blade on there, I can go in and just work around that circle. The thinner the blade, the tighter the circle you can turn. And there's some really good videos out there about, you know, the blade width and such. This is currently what I have on here is a 1/2 inch resaw blade. I don't know how many teeth per inch this is. It's not very many. It's like a 6 TPI is what they would say. So TPI is like teeth per inch. Where's my, there we go. So it's about a 6 TPI. So let me go measure this here. Let's see. There's, oh no, I'm sorry. So that'd be a 4 TPI. There's 4 teeth for every inch. What that does, and they're very deep gullets. So the gullet is that little rounded part behind each tooth. That gullet is what clears the dust out of the cutting path. So as you're doing it, that gullet helps to remove that dust out. It goes down to the bottom, out your, hopefully your dust collection. And then when it travels back around, that gullet is clean and able to move more debris out. So the larger the gullets, the fewer the teeth, the more efficient it's going to be at moving that dust out away from the machine. That being said, you know, it's going to give you a slightly rougher cut because it doesn't have as many teeth, so it's not as precise of a cut. Now, I have my little woodpecker square here, and like I said, I love this because it is an extremely precise instrument. I will call it an instrument. And what I like to do before I do my resawing is I like to ensure that my saw blade is perpendicular to my table surface here. Whenever you change your blades, if you change your blades and you're going back, just make sure that you check the squareness of your table to your blade. If you want to have you know, your bed to be tilted for whatever reason, you're making an angled cut, that's fine. Just make sure if you're going to be cutting for just general cutting purposes, you want this tabletop to be perpendicular to this blade. And so every time I change the blade, I always get this out and just make sure that, because I'm doing a lot of things and moving stuff around, that this table hasn't come out of square. So right now we are in really good square with this blade, which is good, especially when you're doing resawing. This is not a really super high resaw, which is nice, because then, you know, the straighter, the more accurate it's gonna be. Ours is fairly short, so don't have that problem. I am going to pull this out just a little bit here. So, because I need room to feed in this way, and I've got some stuff here. So I'm just pulling this out just a hair. I do have this on wheels, which makes it nice to be able to move around. The other thing I have on here is a fence. My particular saw, which this is a Craftsman. It's the nicest Craftsman bandsaw I could find and / afford. I couldn't afford any of the big ones at the time. But this one I could afford, and it was pretty nice. And from what I saw, it was exactly the same as a Rikon made a model, and it looked like they rolled out of the same factory with different colors. So this one's really nice, but it did not come with a fence. There is no fence on here. I bought this fence. This is from Carter. Carter Products. They make a ton of stuff for bandsaws and some really amazing tools. But this has the mag locks on it. So if you twist that on there, it does not move. I mean, it is tight. And you untwist it and up, twist it, it won't move. So yeah, these are amazing, and they make a lot of different mag lock tools. But this is what it looks like. Just mag lock. So what I will do is I will set up my distance from the fence, this being the fence, try to get that as even as possible so that when I run the wood through, I'm using this as a guide to keep my board going through straight. That being said, if I do get a tiny bit of drift, and so drift is as you're feeding the board through, it might have a tendency to want to push or kick out or wander left or right. That's called drift. So you do kind of need to account for that drift and make sure that you're not getting drift in your cut, which is why I put this line on here so that I can account for any drift. All right, so there's a tool that I use for setup. Let me see if I can find it for doing things like this. It's kind of weird. I'd like to find a different way of doing it, but for now, it does tend to work. And it's just basically one of these good old-fashioned T-square things right here. I don't use it as a square, but because it has a movable slide portion to it, I can use that to establish how deep I need this fence to be set, and then make sure it's even from front to back by using the slot in the table over here. There's a runner slot right here that you can use for like a T-square to slide through. So the first thing I will do is I will make sure that the magnets are not turned on and this thing is free to move. And I push this board so that the teeth are right on my cut line that I made. I want them right on that line because that's establishing where that kerf is going to run, okay? I will take that and I push this against it. And I'm just gonna lock it down for the moment. I don't want it to move. And then I need to look and see, okay, I need to actually just kick this over just a hair. You can, if one side's done, you can loosen the other side and give it just a little bit of a nudge. It doesn't freely move, but you can tap it and get it to slide over just a bit. So that is right on my cut line. And you have to look because the teeth are skewed. So the teeth, some of the teeth are canted this way, some are canted this way. And so that width of the way they're canted from side to side determines how thick that kerf is going to be. And you want them to kind of be evenly spread on each side of your cut line there. Okay, that looks good. That's part one. Part two is I take this tool, I loosen the nut that keeps this, that lets this slide up and down, and then I put this so that the blade is actually in the gullet, touching the fence, and I slide this up to the inside of this right here. And then that is, if I touch that right there, let me see, that is, it's touching the fence right at the point where the teeth touch that piece of wood. So now I can take this and move it to this end. I'm going to unloosen these. I can take this and put it on this end, and I can push this fence back, tighten it there, and then take it over on this end, move this fence over, tighten it here. Okay, this fence is now Just make sure. So this fence is now the same distance at this end and this end as it is here. So it should be running exactly parallel to this blade right here. And that's what you want. I could run I do have a 3/4 inch blade, and I've tried running it on this machine. The problem is it's really not made for that's like the extreme limit of this machine is to run a 3/4 inch blade. You can get better cuts with a thicker blade, but I've come down to using this blade. This might be a 5/8. I think it's a 1/2 inch though. I just want to say this is a 1/2 inch blade on here. Yeah, this is a 1/2 inch blade. And you measure the blade from the very point of the tip of the blade to the back of the blade, and that's your width. So this is a 1/2 inch. I do have a 3/4. It's a monster blade. It's really big. They're really heavy to use. And honestly, if I had a better machine, I would run the 3/4 inch. I'd probably leave it on there almost all the time for resawing. But also I do not have a lot of, you can see the distance I have to resaw is not very much. I barely fit this in here. This doesn't quite fit underneath this wheel right here, this bearing. So taking that out into effect and actually right to here, I actually have about 7 3/4 inches of resaw depth on this saw. I would love one that has about 12 inches of resaw depth or 13 inches, which would raise it much higher than it is. But that being said, we don't need that much depth right now. What I do need to do is set the depth. I don't want these bearings running so far away because they're not going to do as good of a job of keeping this saw running straight and true. I want those bearings close to my wood piece down here. So I'm going to lower these down. I mean, not all the way, but right about there. And that just keeps it running as true and straight as it can go. But like I said, I set this up yesterday, so it should be in pretty good shape here. And then I will take this and run it through. The one thing I do need, and I like to have, that's why I had this piece of wood right here, is I like to have a block of wood to use as a push block. That's why it has these little cuts in the end of it and stuff, because I will push the piece of wood into that last bit of saw instead of having my thumbs or fingers or whatever there. It's nice to have something to push through with. I mean, these bandsaws were kind of created to be meat cutting saws. They're really good at it. All right, vacuum is set up. We've already got power attached to this thing, so that's not a big deal. What do I need? I need my remote, which is right here. And I need my ear protection, which is way over here. All right, we got ear protection. And let's see, do we have any questions? I don't think so. Nope, no questions, no comments, no posers, no queries. All right, let's go ahead and see if we can't get a cut here. Now, if I find it's not cutting great, I might make a slight adjustment to the fence or whatever, especially if I start to see some drift that I can't control. But for the most part, I think we should be good on this setup. So let's go ahead and start up the dust and the machine and do some cutting. All right. That went really well. Now, I'm going to show you something that I'm going to switch over to another camera because I want to show you something here. A lot of times when I talk about cutting wood, I talk about it releasing tension in the wood and the wood will move, and how you have to account for wood movement and things like that. And this is I find that when I resaw, that's a really good example of wood movement. And so hopefully, I'm going to switch to this camera. I think it'll be a little easier to see here. If you look at the ends of this piece of wood are touching. The ends are touching here. Look how much gap is in the middle. Look how much this thing bows out in the middle. It's bowing out. If I squeeze it, you'll see. Look at me squeeze it together and see. That happens because I released tension. When I made that cut, I released tension in this piece of wood, and that piece of wood has now bowed out. That tension was released and it caused the wood to actually bow outwards. That's what's called releasing tension in the wood, and that can make your wood change. There are ways to address this. You can take this piece of wood, put it back on the table like this, and then clamp this thing down for a day and let that wood release all of its stress, but in a straight position. And that will a lot of times help release that tension. But yeah, that's what happens. Now, as far as the book matching goes, so this is the book matching. We will take this piece of wood, we will separate it like this, and then it's hard to see because there's burn marks in here, but let's see if we can get the other side here. Let's try this side. There we go. And you'll see that we get some kind of interesting patterns along the middle of this, but it all joins a center line. So it kind of is a much more symmetrical. It's actually even more symmetrical on this side because you can see where these lines just really go to touch together and stuff. So actually this is off just a hair. Hang on a second, let me get them together. There we go. There. So all of these little knots right here, there'll be one on each side, and these lines move and flow away from the center line, but they do it symmetrically to each other, which is really cool, which is why I like to use this book match. And what I could do now with this is one of two things. I could take this piece of wood. So on their own, they feel okay, but if I bend down, I can feel some tension in this that is still, like if I push on this end of the board, look at this. Look how high that sits up, and this is the same way. So they're not flat. Because I want to glue these things together like this, I need them to be flat. Which means I can do one of two things. I can glue them right now together, put them in clamps, and then clamp across them so that they remain flat. And then but they won't, they may not stay that way. When I take the cauls off, they may pop up. The other thing I can do before I glue these together, I could cut them into smaller pieces and glue them that way. And that might alleviate, because then it's only a small area of curvature. It's not a huge area of curvature from here to here, and that would make them appear to be flatter. They'd still have a little bit of bow to them. The other thing that I could do, and I'm kind of leaning towards this, is to clamp these down to my tabletop, which is pretty flat, and just leave them for a day or two. And just let them acclimatize to being cut, having that pressure relieved, and just being a better piece of wood. If you look in here, and I'll show you, let me get my little pencil here. So part of the reason it does this is, I'm going to get really close in here and show you. The grain on here is running, and it runs kind of this way. So the grain is running this way, and when I release it, that grain wants to bend up and into itself. That grain has tension in it. Normally there's wood supporting that tension. so it stays stable. But when you release the wood inside there, that tension is now free to move, and unless there's something to hold it back, it could remain that way. And then that just causes more trouble for me down the line. That was actually a really nice cut. I mean, if I squeeze these together and look, that's a really clean cut. And measurement wise, I did a really pretty good job of keeping these even all the way through. I will tell you that there are some places where I wandered from the line just a hair, but like I said, part of that's the kerf. But like if I feel right here, this piece is a little thicker than this piece right there, a little thicker right here, and just a little thicker right here. But they are really pretty even, which is good because that means it's less work for me to make them flat once I'm hitting them with this hand plane. All right, I think I'm gonna go ahead, because there was so much tension relief on these, I'm gonna clamp these down to the tabletop right here. And I might use a couple of boards on top as a clamping caul. Actually, you know what? You know what I got? I got an offcut right here. And so if we look at the grain on this, the grain runs this way. So this could be considered, so see those lines on there? Those are the direction the grain is running. If I clamp this down like this, it's going to be super stable and strong across here. So I think I'm going to use this as a clamping caul. Of course, I have to find the clamps to do this with. And I want to clamp it right here in the middle. So let me see what I've got for clamps here. If I got something that'll reach that. Here's one. Think this will work. So we'll take this, and is this going to be, oh, look at that. Perfect. All right. So I'm going to start this off in the middle. And let me make sure I have the clamping pressure exactly on the middle there. And then I will tighten this down and start clamping. There we go. All right. So that is super tight. And like I said, the whole point of that is to get these things back to their original shape and let them just sort of relax a little bit. I'm going to use one of these clamps right here. These are really great. These are a gear clamp. So as you snug this up, you crank this gear down and it pushes it up on here. It's got a gear lever on there. These things are great. You can get some super force on these things. I'm not going to do it like crazy, but put this right here. And then I have one more of those. I'm going to put that over here on this end. And really all I'm doing is giving myself, there we go. So I've got 3 areas of clamping pressure spread across this quarter sawn now piece of wood. And that should put tons of pressure on this board to keep it flat. And I think, yeah, I think that's probably the best thing for this piece of wood. I find it happens a lot when I resaw, is that it just, for whatever reason, when you're going on that grain and you've got like a cathedral pattern or a flat sawn and you resaw that, it just releases all that tension and that thing just wants to pucker like that. So best advice is when you resaw, just take some time to clamp your wood surfaces down. I do this when I cut things like wood for guitar necks. Pardon me. When I cut wood for guitar necks, the last thing you want is that wood to move after you've cut it. So after I cut, I'll clamp it down and just let it de-stress over a couple of days. Hopefully this, over a couple of days, de-stressing will do that. Now, that was not my plan, was to say, oh, let me go, cut this, and then I add 2 days in to my estimate of time. You just don't know sometimes. I mean, sometimes just stuff like this happens, and not every piece of wood I resaw does this. But when it does, I mean, obviously I just can't say, well, screw it, it warped and let's just get another piece of wood. That's not an option. So, you know, this is why I don't like building on timetables, why I don't take special orders, and I don't like having outstanding orders, because you just don't know. And you need some variability. And sometimes you just can't build in enough variability for things that could go wrong and things you have to fix. So I'm on nobody's schedule but my own, and that works for me. I could come back to the bases with the sides glued in and start working on them, but I prefer to give those at least a couple of hours for that glue to set. It doesn't need, like I said, it doesn't need to set for, I don't know, 6 to 8 hours in order to be effective. 2 hours usually, especially on a piece that is not going to have any stress put on it. 2 hours of glue time is usually more than ample for most things, sometimes like half an hour even. But I do want those to be set in, so I usually would give them 2 hours, and then I could come back and start getting those flushed out. Yeah, unfortunate, because I really wanted to set these in glue. I really wanted to get this glued up. But that's going to have to wait now. It's just the way it is. Yeah. But that being said, let me look and see really quickly if I have another piece that I can use. Instead of having to go through, I could find another piece to resaw for that fourth base. So if you will, I'll tell you what, let's take one more break, see if I can find it. If not, we'll just go ahead and shut it down for today. But let me see if I can find a piece of wood. I'm gonna take a short break. I'll be right back. Well, here's where we're at. Like I said, I don't want to mess with this big board right here, because I can, you know, that to me screams I'm a full base. Don't take wood away from a full base. But I did not have some, in my scrap boxes, I didn't have anything that really kind of jumped out at me to be able to be used. That being said, I did find this. The dado cut might look familiar. This was from a base, and probably from one that I screwed up a measurement on. Happens. Hopefully not a lot, but it does happen. But what I can do is try to resaw this. Now, the thing about resawing this piece of wood is that this is a thinner piece of wood. This is 3/4 of an inch. Hopefully it's not any less than 3/4 of an inch. Let's find out exactly what my measurement is on this thing. So we are right at 3/4 of an inch, which makes sense because that's typically, I plane my stuff down to working thickness most of the time. I got really lucky with that board we just did right here that was thicker than that. But now width-wise, it's fine. It's 3 inches. 3 inches is fine. We can, obviously, that gives us 6 inches of width. And my son wants to bring his dogs over. So let me answer my son because, you know, hey, this is real life in real time. So yes, you can. All right, done. So it's plenty of width on here. Oh, hang on. I just messed up my whole, oops. And there we go. I just want to make sure there's no comments or anything. Why does it say the live video ended on Facebook? Huh. Did my Facebook feed go bad? Hang on just one second. I don't know why Facebook died. That's weird. That's the first time that's happened. Because it says it's broadcasting there. Let me look on here. No, it says it's still there. That's kind of weird. It says it's still live. So I'm not sure why. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to interrupt things. I just, you know, when you're sending a feed out to 3 different locations, sometimes weird things happen. Let me redo this here and just see if it's going to come back to being live again. Nope. No, it says it's still there. That's kind of weird. It does. It is. It says it's still live. So I'm not sure why. Sorry about that. I'm not either. But you know, when you're sending a feed out to 3 different locations, sometimes weird things happen. Let me redo this here. Just I can't see the Facebook feed here, so hang on. Let me quiet. Let me go back to my page here, and then we will. I'll kick back in there. Sorry about that. I do apologize. Like I said, the technical difficulties do occur from time to time. So, but it is still live. It just, for whatever reason, the feed I was watching on here didn't say that. And I have to make it large in order to see the chat window. And I want to be able to see the chat windows, even though nobody's chatting. Y'all are very quiet. Nobody's chatting. There we go. All right, I got all my feed windows up. Nobody's saying anything. Whatever. Where was I? Oh, yes. So the thing about this is that it's going to be a much thinner because I do lose thickness. Like if I measure, how much did I lose on this? This was 7/8. Let's measure this and see. So this was 7/8. And now I lost about almost 1/16 of an inch of kerf to the saw blade. So if I do the same thing on this, I have to be really careful that I am very accurate with this. So I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to run this through and get that width down to what I need. I don't need a width that is 3 inches. That's more than I need. So I'm going to make it, because I get more accurate. The shorter that piece of wood is going to be, the more accurate that cut is. Get it cut down to size, and then we can do our resaw on here. So 1, 2, 3, let's get this going here. This saw blade is already set up. The only thing I don't have is the dust. Let's get the dust in here real quick. It's the only problem with not having dust going to all of your machines is that you have to take the time to kind of move things around. All right, let me get my ears, get the dust switch somewhere. Where'd you go? There it is. All right. We will go over to here and we will cut this down to size. Since we already have this set up for that width, we're just going to take a little off of here. Let me measure this. Okay, now this one's not, let me do this side. There we go, this side. And we're just going to drop this down. But remember, just be safe. You know, just because I want to get this done doesn't mean I want to hurry and rush everything. I get my safety tools all set up, make sure my measurements are all good, make sure I have my dust collection set up. You know, don't be in such a rush that you skip steps or do something dangerous. Okay, this one is good to go. Let's go ahead and run it through. All right, that's done. So we're back over to here just to do a measurement. You can see that I just cut that little piece off right there, boop, and it's this much. Something we don't need. All right. I also discovered that this is my flat side right here. So I'm going to run this on the table side right here. I need to figure out my width on here. So I said this was 3/4 of an inch. So obviously half of that is going to be 3/8. Get my 3/8 set up on here. I want to set up 3/8 on my blade here, or on my blade. On my marking gauge, I want to set up 3/8 on my marking gauge. So push this out a little further. That should be exactly 3/8 right there. Looks good. And I can test that. I'm going to test it on this side, just down here where it's not critical. So I'm going to run it on this side, and then I'm going to flip it over, and it should drop in the same hole, and it does. So we're dead smack in the middle. All right, so now I'm going to take this marking guide, and I'm going to mark my cut line all the way down to here, to this gap. It doesn't need to go all the way through. We'll just do that again, just to get it nice and deep. Now we should take our pencil, put it in that cut line just to make it more visible. That's a pretty thin cut line. All right, so there's our line down the middle. You can see that. And then I'll do the same thing on the edge here. I'm just going to hold this in my hand and do this because it's easier. Because like I said, it's in grain, so running it through in grain can be a little more difficult. But there we go. Same thing here. I want to mark that line. And then I'm going to have to reset, oops. I'm going to have to reset the, in grain is such a pain. I'm going to have to reset the width on the fence over there. So I want to make sure that I have a good line on the end here, and you can see that line, hopefully you can see that line on there. All right, let's go back over here. And we've got to reset this to our new width. And let me grab my, let me just do one thing real quick. I'm going to clean all the dust off of the tabletop, because even though I have the dust collection pulling from the bottom, it still throws a lot of dust. It's just one of those machines. All right, that is ready to go whenever we get that done. Let me find my T-square here. We're going to take this board, we're going to set this up the exact same way. So I'm going to take the dust, or the mag locks, and turn those off. Set this board in here. If I do it right here, it's going to be way off. I mean, that's just not the distance I need. So I need this to be resting right on that line right there. And I'm going to find out right there So I want that measurement to be exactly there. Okay, let's see what that gives us. I'm going to loosen this lock. I'm going to slide this right into the gullet. And I want this touching that fence. So it runs inside of this. The table has a groove in it. It's a 3/4 inch wide slot for running like a square or something inside there, like a miter square. Although the one that comes with it is complete garbage. But that's okay. It gives me enough that I can now make some measurement changes here. So I'm going to push this over here. Push this in here. So you want these to be touching. There we go. All right. Yeah, Carter's makes these really cool setup tools. So they have, it's a flat piece of metal with a magnet, and it has a little gap cut out to allow for the curvature of the teeth, and it basically magnets right to here. And then you basically look down the length of that, and you can square your fence up using that little piece of metal. It's kind of a cool little setup tool. Anyway, this looks good. I'm going to recheck my board again on here just to make sure that I'm getting right in the spot that I want. That looks good. So let's go ahead and make a cut here and see what we can come up with. So I'm going to turn the dust on, turn on the saw, and we'll do some resawing. Okay. That worked out. That was fine. The wood pattern on here is actually pretty cool. I kind of like that. Thickness, I tell you, I try to get that thing set up right in the middle, and I always end up just a hair off one way or the other. So yeah, I'm about a 32nd thicker on one side than the other. That being said, this one has much less, has a little bit. See if you can see it. And like I said, I get this with each one where I'm touching the ends down here and down here. And there's just this one has a lot less, but it still has a little bit of bowing there where that tension is released. You would figure it would just be flat across the way, but it's not. There's a little bit of bowing. If I go this way, probably has a little bit, yeah, you can see it. There's a little bit of rocking going back and forth there. So even this one did not come out extremely flat. But what I do like is that the pattern I'm going to get on the inside of this thing is kind of pretty cool. Which way did this come off of here? I have to make sure that it cuts the same. This way? Yeah. So I'm going to get some nice cathedral cuts or kind of pattern out of this thing. So you can see how it kind of is symmetrical. Even more so on this side, it's hard to see because of the saw marks and such and the kind of the cutting of this, but very cool look. So this will look really cool when it's glued together. I should probably do the same on this one though and just glue it flat just so that it will, or not glue it flat. What am I saying? I should probably clamp this down as well just to, I mean, it's not much. This is very, very, very minimal. But on the other hand, you know, we want things to be good. I could probably get away with just doing one clamp on here, right in the middle. I could probably just clamp this with a clamp without even worrying about clamping it to a surface because it's not a lot. And that's probably what I'm going to do. Let me get a board here that I can, or just a clamp. Let's get a clamp. And we're wandering around looking for a clamp. Where are my clamps? They wander. They do. They have a tendency to go places. Do they though? Or do I just have a tendency to stick them places? I do. All right, well, I don't know where they went. But you know what I do have? I have these really cool clamps. Once again, kudos to the Craig company who just makes great woodworking tools. I've got these clamps, which originally I got for doing like pocket hole screws, but they are spring clamps. They have very large circular clamping pads on them. So you can see there's one on each side. So they have these large circular clamping pads, and then they squeeze together and you can adjust the tension of these things. You clip them and there is a couple 100 pounds of force between there. You can make it lighter, you can make it heavier, but the nice thing is that the clamping goes across this large flat circular surface. So when I have something like this board that I just want to clamp together for the time being, I just put a clamp on here and get it nice and even and put a clamp and whew, that is clamped up. And I've got a lot of these things because for whatever reason, I just fell in love with them. And so when I had the money at one point in time, I bought a bunch of them because I just find that they are super, super effective at clamping for flat surfaces. So I'm gonna put a couple of these on here and you can see that that edge now is like, it's clamped pretty tight there. And I can put one more on that side, I have a bunch of them. Let's do it. I'm gonna put one more on this side just to make sure that I'm getting super clamping pressure across there. And then there. From there, we will just let this rest with the other one. And by the time we come back to use them, hopefully, fingers crossed, hopefully all of these boards will be flat and be ready for some gluing. And I got a lot of sawdust over here. I need to clean this up. But that will be our next step. So if you come into the shop with me on Wednesday, today's Monday, right? Yeah, Wednesday. If you come into the shop with me on Wednesday, we will take these out of the clamps. We will put them into more clamps because we're going to glue them together. I know, right? That's what I was kind of hoping to avoid. I'll tell you what, maybe what I'll do, I'll come back and check these tomorrow. That's the one that I just did because this had the least amount of bowing in it. So I'll come back and check this one tomorrow. If there's no, I'll take the clamps off. If the bowing is pretty much under control, I will set this one up in the glue and glue it together so that we can have a step to work with. So I'll have this one that we will take out of the clamps and put into the glue, but I'll have this one that I'll take out, we'll already book matched glued together, and we can move forward with this one so you can kind of keep that workflow going, and you can keep up and you don't have to watch glue dry once again, because we will have to glue these together. So we can do that, and then we can take one out of the glue and move forward with it. And that sounds like a good plan. Hopefully you think so. All right, well, that being said, I think that's where we're going to end today. What is it, about 1:30? So that's what, 2.5 hours of woodworking fun. I am not going to be ending today. I have some other things to do, but that's where you get to leave. So thank you if you did drop by and you watched. Thanks for coming in, and I appreciate it. And like I said, my socials are listed in the description below. If you want to leave something in a tip jar, keeps me in wood and saw blades and such, but it's not necessary. I do stream every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Yeah, that's my plan. 11 o'clock Eastern time, I am available to watch on YouTube and JR's Woodshop on Facebook and JR's Woodshop on Twitch, or Jeff Revell on YouTube. So whichever your pleasure, whichever your fun, if you're on one of those where you can follow or hit a like or hit a subscribe, I always appreciate those. Yeah, but until Wednesday, until the next time we are together, have a wonderful afternoon. Stay safe out there, please. Wear your mask. I mean, it's just a smart thing to do until you get your shots at least. And even after then, wear your mask. Be safe. Love each other. Have fun. And I will talk to you on Wednesday. Have a great day.